You know it. They ask, you give. They take, you stay silent. Again. And again. It's not that you're unaware. You feel the imbalance. You see the pattern. But when it's time to speak, something stops you. And it's not fear of conflict. It's something deeper. A voice that whispers. If I say something, will they leave? If I stand up for myself, am I selfish? This is the invisible cage, built not by chains, but by guilt. And it's the reason millions stay quiet in relationships, families, workplaces, even when they know they're being used. But the Stoics? They understood a deeper truth. Silence is not always peace. And speaking up is not always ego. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, but reminded himself daily. Don't be ashamed of needing help. You have a duty. A duty to truth. A duty to yourself. This video isn't just about toxic people. It's about the war inside you. And how Stoic philosophy offers a calm, grounded path to reclaim your voice without guilt. Let's begin. Why you let it happen. 6 hidden reasons you stay silent. 1. You're afraid of seeming selfish. You know they're using you. They ask. You give. They take. You stay silent. Even when you're exhausted, even when your needs go unmet. You smile, nod, and say, it's fine. But inside, something feels wrong. And yet, you don't speak. Why? Because somewhere deep down, you fear that standing up for yourself means being selfish. You've been taught that good people give endlessly. That saying no is rude. That setting a boundary is pushing people away. And so, instead of protecting your energy, you protect their feelings, at your own expense. The Stoics would call that a distortion of virtue. Epictetus reminds us, no man is free who is not master of himself. Self-mastery doesn't mean pleasing everyone. It means choosing what aligns with your principles, even when it makes others uncomfortable. You're not selfish for setting a limit. You're not cruel for saying no. You're simply reclaiming the space you've been taught to surrender. Ask yourself, would I call a friend selfish for needing rest? For saying no with grace? Then why can't you extend the same kindness to yourself? Stoicism isn't about cold detachment. It's about honest alignment, living from your values, not from guilt. You don't have to yell. You don't have to explain. You just have to remember. You matter too. And honoring that is not selfish. It's strength. 2. You're afraid of hurting others. You think, if I say no, they'll be hurt. If I speak up, they'll think I don't love them. If I set a boundary, they'll feel rejected. So you swallow your truth. Soften your tone. Make yourself smaller, just to keep their comfort intact. But here's what no one tells you. Protecting someone's comfort at the cost of your own integrity isn't kindness. It's fear. The Stoics knew that truth and compassion are not enemies. Seneca once wrote, a sword never kills anybody, it is a tool in the killer's hand. Words don't hurt people. Intent does. If your intention is clarity, not cruelty, then truth is a gift. You're not hurting them by expressing your limits. You're giving them a chance to see the real you, and meet you there, honestly. And if they can't? That's not your failure. That's their resistance to reality. Stoic strength isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming clean, with your words, your energy, your intentions. You can love someone deeply, and still say, this crosses my line. You can care, and still walk away. Because protecting your peace doesn't require you to wound others. It only asks that you stop wounding yourself. 3. You've confused guilt with loyalty. You say, But they raised me. They've done so much for me. I owe them everything. And suddenly, your life stops being yours. Not because you don't love them, but because guilt has replaced choice. Guilt is not the same as loyalty. Loyalty is given freely, from love. Guilt is extracted through pressure. When someone constantly reminds you of what they've done for you, and expects obedience in return, that's not love. That's leverage. And the Stoics warned us about this trap. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. Likewise, if someone succeeds in making you feel guilty, ask yourself, is that guilt rooted in virtue or manipulation? You are not disloyal for growing. You are not a traitor for changing. You're not selfish for protecting your peace from people who claim to love you, but drain you every time you try to breathe." Real loyalty respects freedom. Real love doesn't guilt-trip you into silence or sacrifice. So the next time guilt knocks on your door, ask, is this voice my conscience, or their conditioning? Because loyalty to others should never come at the cost of betrayal to yourself. 4. You were trained to be the good one. Every family has roles. The rebel. The black sheep. And then, there's you. The reliable one. The fixer. The one who never complains. You became the good one. Not because it was who you truly are, but because it was safe. Being good meant approval. It meant less conflict. It meant they loved you, at least a version of you. But here's the problem. That version was built on suppression. You smiled through hurt. You agreed to things you resented. You made peace by betraying yourself. And the Stoics would call that exactly what it is. A false virtue. Seneca wrote, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." In other words, you play small to avoid judgment, yet dream big when no one's watching. The role of the good one isn't your identity. It's a survival strategy. And while it kept you safe then, it's keeping you stuck now. So ask yourself, who am I when I'm not trying to please them? What would I say if I wasn't afraid of losing their love? Because the truth is, if their love depends on you being silent, agreeable, and endlessly self-sacrificing, it's not love. It's control, wrapped in praise. You don't owe anyone the watered-down version of you just to be accepted. You owe yourself the truth, even if that truth is inconvenient for others. 5. You think speaking up will make you the villain. You rehearse it in your head. What you would say if you weren't so afraid of being too much, too dramatic, too selfish. Because somewhere along the line, you were taught that setting boundaries makes you bad. That speaking up is an attack. That honesty is cruelty. And so, you bite your tongue. You downplay your needs. You keep the peace, even when it's breaking you. But here's the Stoic reality. Silence isn't always noble. Sometimes it's just fear dressed in politeness. Epictetus taught, "It is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them." You've judged yourself for wanting space, for needing rest, for not tolerating being used. But what if those aren't flaws? What if they're signs you're finally waking up? You're not a villain for wanting respect. You're not wrong for saying, "Enough." You're just no longer willing to play small so others can feel big. So here's the shift. Speak, not to hurt, but to heal the part of you that's tired of being ignored. They may call you selfish. They may say you've changed. Let them. Because you didn't come here to play a role. You came here to live in truth. 6. You don't want to lose them Even if you've already lost yourself, you stay quiet. Because you're afraid if you speak, they'll leave. You're afraid if you set a boundary, you'll break something that can't be fixed. So you bend. You shrink. You swallow the words you want to say. All in the name of keeping the connection alive. But here's the painful truth. If being close to them requires losing yourself, you've already lost something far more precious. The Stoics didn't fear loss. They feared living without virtue, without alignment, without self-respect. Seneca wrote, "It is not a man's enemy or foe who lures him to evil ways. It is his own mind." You're not being lured by them. You're being lured by the idea of them. By the illusion that silence saves love. That compliance earns belonging. But real love doesn't demand your silence. It invites your truth. So if they leave because you spoke honestly, let them. Because you're not losing them. You're losing the illusion that suffering is connection. And in that loss, you begin to reclaim something deeper. Your peace. Your voice. Yourself. The Stoic Path. How to speak without shame or guilt. 1. Recognize your inner silence as a survival response. You weren't always silent. There was a time you spoke up, asked for help, expressed discomfort. But somewhere along the line, your words began to disappear. Not because you had nothing to say, but because every time you tried, it cost you something. Judgment. Rejection. More conflict than comfort. So you stopped speaking. This silence isn't weakness. It's adaptation. A survival response. The Stoics understood this deeply. They knew that the soul withdraws when the world becomes unsafe. Epictetus himself, once a slave, didn't start his journey with bold declarations. He started by observing, calmly, silently, until he built enough clarity to speak with strength, not fear. So before you blame yourself for staying quiet, understand this: your silence was protection. But now, it's become a prison. Here's the Stoic shift. Don't judge your silence. Study it. Honor its reason for existing. Then decide consciously whether it still serves you. Ask yourself, am I staying silent to keep peace, or to avoid pain? Because only when you name the fear behind your silence can you begin to dissolve it. You can't speak your truth if you're still punishing yourself for staying quiet in the past. This is the beginning, not of noise but of voice. Calm. Clear. Unapologetic. 2. Separate guilt from responsibility. You want to speak. But the moment the words rise, something else rises faster: guilt. You think, if I say this, they'll be hurt. If I draw a boundary, I'll be the bad one. So you stay quiet. And in that quiet, you carry a weight that was never fully yours. But here's the Stoic truth. Guilt is not always a sign that you've done something wrong. Sometimes it's a signal that you're breaking a pattern that was never right to begin with. Seneca wrote, "A good character, when established, is not easily overthrown." He wasn't talking about being agreeable. He meant being rooted in principle, even when emotions swirl. Feeling guilty for honoring your limits doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're rewiring a system that taught you self-abandonment was love. So here's your practice. When guilt rises, ask, am I feeling guilty because I caused harm? Or because I finally stopped tolerating harm? There's a difference. And the Stoic path is about choosing clarity over comfort. Speak, not with rage, not with revenge, but with grounded responsibility. Because your voice isn't a weapon. It's a boundary. A truth. A compass. And the people who truly respect you won't ask you to stay silent to be loved. 3. Speak with virtue, not emotion. You've been silent for too long. So when you finally decide to speak, the words feel heavy. The emotions flood in: anger, hurt, exhaustion. You want to yell. You want to unload years of swallowed frustration. And you might have every reason to. But here's the danger: when emotion drives the words, clarity gets lost. The Stoics knew this well. Epictetus taught, "Any person capable of angering you becomes your master." He didn't mean you should suppress your anger. He meant you should master it. Use it as fuel for virtue, not destruction. When you speak from virtue, courage, justice, honesty, you speak with power that doesn't need to shout. Here's what that sounds like. Instead of, "I'm sick of you using me," say, "I've realized this dynamic isn't healthy for me anymore." Instead of, "You never care," say, "I no longer feel respected or valued in this relationship." No blame. No explosions. Just clarity, calm, firm, and anchored in truth. Speaking with virtue doesn't make your message softer. It makes it sharper. Because the point isn't to win the argument. It's to honor yourself without abandoning your principles. And when you do that, you don't just speak, you lead. 4. Accept the fallout, protect the peace. Speaking up doesn't always lead to applause. Sometimes it leads to silence, pushback, guilt trips, even distance. And that's what most people fear, not the speaking, but the fallout that comes after. What if they get angry? What if they stop talking to me? What if I lose them? Here's what the Stoics would say. If the cost of peace is losing yourself, it's not peace, it's captivity. You cannot live in fear of how others will respond to your truth. Because once you start negotiating with your boundaries, you start erasing them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. But also, if it is true, don't stay silent." Yes, your relationship might change. Yes, some people might walk away. But what stays is you. Your peace. Your clarity. Your self-respect. This is the Stoic way. Let go of outcomes you can't control. Speak with virtue. And accept that not everyone will stay when you stop playing small. That's not your loss. That's your alignment. Because peace doesn't always feel peaceful at first. Sometimes it feels like losing, but what you're really losing is what was draining you all along. The voice you've been waiting for is yours. You've been waiting for the right moment, for the right words, for someone to understand without you having to speak. But here's the Stoic truth. That moment doesn't come from them. It comes from you. The voice you've been waiting to hear, the one that sets boundaries with calm, that speaks up without guilt, that protects your energy with clarity. It's already inside you. You were never too much. You were just in places that asked you to be less. You were never wrong for feeling drained. You were just surrounded by people who fed off your silence. And now, you don't have to scream. You don't have to explain. You just have to stop abandoning yourself. Speak, not to control others, but to return to yourself. Stand firm, not to dominate, but to honor your value. The Stoic doesn't raise their voice. They raise their standards. So if this video stirred something real in you, let that be your signal. Comment below. I will no longer apologize for protecting my peace. Like the video. Share it with someone who needs courage. And subscribe to True Stoic Mindset. Because the world doesn't need louder voices. It needs grounded ones. And yours is ready.